Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti interview. I'm Joe Kornik, Editor-in-Chief of Vision by Protiviti, a global content resource examining big themes that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. Today, we're exploring the future of privacy, and I'm thrilled to welcome Sue Bergamo to the program. Sue is an executive advisor, former CIO, CISO, and global technology strategist for Microsoft. She sits on several boards, is host of the Short Takes podcast, and author of So You Want to Be a CISO, a practical guide to becoming a successful cybersecurity leader. Sue, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So first off, Sue, let's talk about the state of the CISO. As you point out in your book, which I mentioned in the intro, So You Want to Be a CISO, the position is really in a state of flux right now. So talk to me a little bit about where the CISO is right now and how it's changing, and if you think it will continue to be a critical part of the executive team going forward.
I like to use the term evolution because we're in a position that I hope will evolve to a better state in the future. Just like the CIO role about 20 years ago, it had to go through some ebbs and flows, and finally it came out at the end of the tunnel in a much better spot, and was very much. Everyone was very much aware of what the CIO needed and wanted to do, which was really around our back office applications or our infrastructure that ran our corporations. The CISO role is going through that evolution, and unfortunately, right now it's in a really ugly spot. But I'm hopeful that it'll come out a little bit better. What's going on in the industry is the SEC cyber disclosure rule. That came into effect late last year, which basically said the CISO does not need to report to the board, but the board and the executive team needs to be aware of cyber incidents. So what ended up happening with that, and I can go into more elaboration around two CISOs that were charged with felonies for material breaches that happened in the past. But what happened with that is that this is my opinion based on what I see and what I know. Executive teams decided that CISOs weren't really needed. And a lot of CISOs said, we're not going to put up with this personal liability. So a lot of us left our positions. And then there were a whole bunch of us that lost their jobs because the SEC cyber disclosure rule talked about awareness. They didn't put the CISO on the board, but they talked about awareness with incidents. And so what has transpired is, and I don't mean with any disrespect to SecOps managers, but inexperienced from a CISO perspective, SecOps managers, security operations people were put into the role of head of security, sometimes CISO, but mostly head of security. Because they deal with incident response. Now, the dirty little secret in most organizations is that when an incident occurs, the SecOps manager has a major role in that breach, defending against a breach. But they're really there to tell the CISO where the threat is coming from. They are not there to lead the band. They are only there for a very specific focus. So I see this convergence of inexperienced people and cyber criminals, and we'll see what the future brings. But I do hope that when this evolution comes to fruition, that the CISO will be put into a much better position, much better light with the executive team.
You mentioned those SEC decisions and regulations. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all or talk more specifically about where sort of CISOs find themselves between like a rock and a hard place right now.
Yeah, there's really three types of CISOs. There's the very inexperienced one that's just coming into the role, not really sure what they're doing. And that's, again, it's not a dig. They have to learn, and they're going to learn the hard way. There's the middle of the road, as I call it. They're more experienced than the inexperienced ones, but they're still trying to find their spot in the position. And then there's the experts who are exiting. So a lot of CISOs on the inexperienced and middle of the road side, believe that our jobs are really about the technology. And that is so far from the truth. The experienced ones know that we follow something called a triad. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And we do that, we accomplish the triad through people, process, and technology. People's obviously our employees. Process is security frameworks and controls, and then the tech. Once you get the tech up and running and optimized for efficiencies and to give it, so it's giving you the data that you need in order to defend your companies, the tech is the easy part. It changes all the time, but that's the easy part. It's the compliance frameworks that take the majority of our time. And if you ask any experienced CISO, they'll tell you once the tech is installed and optimized, we spend the majority of our time on compliance and data privacy. The newbies, as I refer to them, sometimes we have to explain this to them and explain why compliance and data privacy are so important. So it's a little bit of a mess out there right now. And then you throw in the personal liability. And let me just expand upon that for a moment. We had two well-known CISOs with two very public companies. I won't mention their names, charged with felonies through the SEC, which led to the cybersecurity disclosure rule being implemented after the first one. The second one fell into that disclosure rule. That sent shockwaves, not just waves, shockwaves through the CISO industry. And we're just sitting here saying to ourselves, holy cow, like a lot of us don't have a lot of support because everybody thinks cyber's our problem and not theirs. It takes a village to defend a company against cyber attackers. And now we're being held personally responsible and felony charges with potential jail time. So we're all saying to ourselves, I don't think so, which is why there's a huge influx of us getting out of the role.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about the strategic role of the CISO, or sort of where that falls in the organization. And let's talk specifically about data governance and protecting privacy. How do the companies that do it best do it best? Do they have in your experience, do they have chief privacy officers or chief data officers? Is there a playbook that business leaders should be following to really make sure that they're getting this right?
I wish there was a playbook, but there isn't. So I think that's half of the battle because, everyone has a cell phone or a computer and everyone feels that they know technology, right? And they know data. But, this is a very specialized field. The CIO, I'll just say tech and security. It's a very specialized field. I've been fortunate enough to have both roles. And yes, everyone always has an opinion on how we can do our jobs better, but this is our craft, and we have all kinds of different education or certifications. There's no one thing that anyone can point to and no one game plan. But good C-level tech and security executives are well-rounded. We study, we research, we get involved, and we understand how to protect data. And now that AI is coming out, we have a whole new set of technologies that we need to encompass into our program. So it's about staying involved and understanding what we need to do to protect the data.
When you're in those conversations with the C-suite and the boards and the business leaders, do you think they understand the importance, not just the compliance and the governance aspect of this, but maybe the business importance of data privacy and what that means ultimately to building customer trust and the business and the bottom line?
I do think that everyone understands that data matters and that data is important to running the business. I mean, every business needs information in order to make good decisions and to process customer requests, B2B requests, employee requests. It's all data driven. And so is it given enough limelight to, it depends on the size of the company. So I do think that executives and the boards understand the importance of data and how to use it. But I think where they fall short is really in the investments of strategizing and securing the information and giving even the technology or the engineering teams what they need to make sure that data is sound.
Right. Right. And that's an interesting perspective, obviously, from the company side. How confident are you that we'll get this right for the customer, the client, the consumer? Are you optimistic that they'll be better off over the next several years?
I'm always optimistic. The sun's always shining in my world, right? Data is the stronghold of every company. From managing the most minute piece of information all the way to executive reporting. Everybody's processing information. So, I think with some of the technologies that are coming out, either through our public cloud vendors or through artificial intelligence, I think that the data's and the ability to gather data is just going to be better in the future.
Well, Sue, you said you were an optimist, so I'm going to leave you with this final question where I ask you to look out a few years, maybe the end of the decade, right? Let's say 2030. Where do you think we'll be in terms of privacy, data privacy? Do you think 2030 is a better place than where we are currently?
Well, we can only get better with time, right? Kind of like a fine wine. So I'm optimistic that, material breaches will continue to happen fast and furiously. And finally, our business brothers and sisters will wake up and say, oh, I need to be responsible for security too. I need to be responsible to help the CISO or the CIO or whoever with my data problems. Maybe I should get more involved. So I am optimistic that eventually the tables will turn. I think it's going to take a little bit more time, but 2030, sure, I'll go with that.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the time today, Sue, and the insights. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you having me.
And thank you for watching the Vision by Protiviti interview. On behalf of Sue Bergamo, I'm Joe Kornik. We'll see you next time.